Imagine losing the love of your life, only to discover that before he died, he arranged your next chance at happiness. A blind date, set up by a man who's no longer alive. A promise made between friends, and a love story that refuses to end. Before we begin, I'd love to know, where are you watching from tonight? Drop it down in the comments, and let's see how far this story reaches. Because what you're about to hear isn't just a story about love. It's about what love leaves behind. So settle in, turn down the lights, and let's begin. It was one of those afternoons that stretched on without edges. Soft light spilling through curtains, the slow hum of the refrigerator, and a silence so heavy it felt like another presence in the room. Emily Carter moved quietly through her small living room, her hands dusting along the worn spines of books she hadn't touched in years. Her late husband's collection still sat neatly on the shelf, each one where he'd left it. To Kill a Mockingbird, The Old Man and the Sea, stories that still carried his fingerprints in the margins. She didn't mean to stop, but one book felt heavier than the rest. Her brow furrowed. She turned it in her hands, and from between the yellowed pages, something slid loose, a small, sealed envelope, the paper soft with time. Her name was written across it in the looping, familiar handwriting she had once known better than her own. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. It had been a year since Ryan's voice had faded from their home. A year since she'd packed away his clothes, tucked away his things, tried and failed to move forward. Yet here he was again, his handwriting staring back at her like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside, a folded letter. She hesitated, afraid that reading it might break her all over again. But love, even when it's gone, still has a way of pulling you closer. She unfolded the paper slowly. The words blurred for a moment behind her tears before coming into focus. If you're reading this, it means you finally dare to clean my old books. I'm proud of you already. You've spent so much time taking care of everyone else. It's time someone takes care of you. A soft, broken smile lifted the corners of her lips. That was Ryan, teasing her, comforting her, even now. But as she read on, her heart began to race. I know what you're thinking, that this is crazy. But I made a promise, Emily. One last thing before I go. I've arranged for you to meet someone. The word struck like a quiet thunderclap. Her breath hitched. A faint laugh escaped her, small and disbelieving. It didn't make sense. A date? Arranged by her late husband? Yet she kept reading. Please don't be angry, it said. This isn't about replacing me. It's about reminding you that love doesn't die. It just waits for you to let in again. Her hand pressed against her mouth. The tears came then, uninvited but unstoppable. Not from sorrow this time, but from something deeper. Confusion, fear, hope. At the bottom of the page, she found a name, a time, a place. Cafe Bologna. Saturday, 4 p.m. That cafe. She remembered it instantly. The little place on Maple Street where Ryan had first told her he loved her all those years ago. Her heart ached. It couldn't be a coincidence. Nothing about Ryan ever was. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it against her chest. Her whisper filled the empty room. Ryan, what are you doing? Outside, the first drops of rain tapped gently against a window, soft and steady. It sounded almost like an answer, like a quiet invitation from the past. Emily stood there for a long moment, the letter still warm in her hands. Somewhere deep inside her grief, a new feeling began to stir, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not joy, not peace, something smaller, more fragile, possibility. And though she didn't know it yet, that single letter, written by the man she had loved and lost, was about to change everything. Morning light filtered through pale curtains, spilling across a kitchen that looked lived in but untouched. Dishes stacked neatly, a single mug resting by the sink, the faint smell of coffee that had long gone cold. Emily Carter moved through the space like someone tracing the outline of a life that no longer quite fit. Every movement was quiet, careful, measured. She had learned to keep her days small. The smaller they were, the less they hurt. The radio murmured softly in the background, a cheerful voice talking about weekend plans and sunny forecasts. She turned it off, Silence felt more honest. Outside, the world was alive. People walking dogs, neighbors mowing lawns, children's laughter echoing down the street. Inside, time stood still. It had been a year since Ryan's passing, but grief doesn't measure itself in months. It lives in the details. The empty chair at breakfast, the coat still hanging by the door, the echo of a voice you keep expecting to hear. Noah, her 7-year-old son, came rushing in from his room, his backpack bouncing against his shoulders. Mom, we're going to paint pumpkins at school today. Emily knelt, adjusting his jacket collar, smiling through the ache in her chest. That sounds fun, sweetheart. You'll show me when you're back. He nodded, eyes bright with the kind of energy that only children carry, the kind that burns through sadness without even knowing it's there. When the door closed behind him, the house exhaled. Empty again. She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around her mug, the coffee now more for comfort than taste. Her gaze drifted toward the small collection of photos pinned to the fridge, snapshots of a life that used to be. Ryan with his crooked grin, his arms slung around her shoulders. Noah, just a toddler, riding on his father's back. A family frozen in time, untouched by what came after. Her mind replayed the hospital days, the sterile smell of antiseptic, the hum of machines, the quiet courage in Ryan's eyes as he pretended not to be in pain. She remembered holding his hand and promising she'd be okay, even though she already knew she wouldn't. He had been everything, her best friend, her safe place, her home. And when he left, it wasn't just grief she felt. It was a loss of direction. The compass of her world, gone. At work, she wore her nurse's badge like armor. The halls of the hospital gave her something she could still fix, something she could still control. She moved from room to room with practice care, changing 4 lines, adjusting pillows, smiling when she needed to, even when her eyes said otherwise. Her co-workers spoke of plans and promotions and weekend getaways. Emily listened, nodded, and offered polite smiles, though her world had narrowed to 2 things: keeping her son safe and keeping herself from breaking in front of him. At night, after Noah was asleep, she would sit by the window with a blanket draped over her shoulders. The city lights shimmered faintly in the distance, and she would imagine Ryan there, somewhere in the quiet between the stars. She'd whisper to him sometimes, the way she used to when he worked late shifts. Just small things. I fixed the sink today. Noah got an A on his spelling test. I'm trying, Ryan. I really am. Then she'd pause, listening to silence, pretending it was his answer. There were moments when she almost felt normal again, when Noah would giggle mid-cartoon, when she'd catch herself humming while folding laundry. But joy felt like trespassing. Every time she smiled, guilt followed, whispering that she wasn't supposed to move on. Not yet. She told herself she was fine like this. Safe. Predictable. Grief had become familiar, and familiarity, she found, was easier than hope. Yet something inside her had begun to stir since finding that letter. It sat on her nightstand now, the paper folded neatly but often touched, as though she could absorb courage through her fingertips. She'd reread Ryan's words in quiet moments, her heart pulling in 2 directions, one toward the past, one toward the faint glimmer of a future she hadn't dared to imagine. She thought of what he wrote. It's time someone takes care of you. The idea felt strange, wrong, even, to let someone else step into a space that had once belonged only to him. And yet, Ryan had always known her better than she knew herself. The question haunted her now, whispering between the ticking seconds of her day. What if, just what if, Ryan was right? She glanced at the clock. Saturday was coming fast. The cafe he mentioned, Cafe Bologna, was still there, she knew. A little place tucked on the corner of Maple Street, with brick walls and warm light that spilled onto the sidewalk at dusk. She hadn't gone there since their first date, since laughter still came easy, since love still felt eternal. Now, just thinking about it made her heart race. Emily set down her cup, her eyes lingering on the letter one last time before she whispered to the empty room. I don't know if I can do this. The room, as always, stayed quiet. But somewhere deep inside, a part of her, the part that still believed in miracles, whispered back, you have to try. And for the first time in a long while, Emily felt something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Not joy, not peace, but motion. The slow, uncertain beginning of a life no longer on pause. The city skyline stretched beneath a pale morning haze, glass towers catching the early light, like quiet reminders of ambition and distance. Miles away from the quiet rhythm of Emily Carter's life, another story was stirring. One bound to hers by time, regret, and an unspoken promise. Ethan Walker stood by the window of his apartment, suitcase half-packed at his feet. For years, this view had been his measure of success. The skyline of London, the hum of construction far below, the endless blueprints scattered across his desk. He had built everything he once thought he wanted. And yet, the higher he climbed, the emptier it felt. He ran a hand through his hair and glanced down at the letter lying on the counter. Its edges were soft now, worn from the number of times he'd unfolded it. The handwriting on it, steady, familiar, belonged to a man he hadn't seen in years. Ryan Carter, his best friend, his brother in all but blood. Ethan had received a letter months ago, delivered after Ryan's death, sealed with words that had waited for him, heavy and final. He had read it only once, but every word had burned itself into memory. I know you'll never forgive yourself for what you felt, Ethan. You don't have to. I already did. You once told me you couldn't stay because you love what was mine. But love isn't ownership. It's protection. And I trust you more than anyone to protect her when I can't. Ethan had folded it carefully then, unable to read any further. He'd kept his distance all those years for a reason. Because loving Emily, even silently, felt like betrayal. Because Ryan had chosen her, and that should have been the end of it. But time has a way of softening the sharpest convictions. When Ryan got sick, all that pride melted away. Ethan had flown back, quietly, without expectation, just to be near his friend. He'd thought he could help somehow, ease the burden, hold things together. But illness doesn't need engineers or blueprints. It only needs courage. And Ryan had all of it. Ethan had been there for the last weeks, the hospital corridors heavy with antiseptic and unspoken goodbyes. He'd watched Ryan fight with the same steadiness he brought to everything in life. Even dying, Ryan had thought of others first. One night, near the end, Ethan had sat by his bedside, trying to steady his voice. "You should rest," he had said. Ryan had smiled, that faint, exhausted smile that looked too calm for a man so close to the edge. "Rest comes soon enough," he had whispered. Then, after a long silence, he added, "Promise me something." Ethan had shaken his head immediately. "Ryan, don't." But Ryan had cut him off with a look, the kind that held both command and love. "Promise me you'll look after her. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because you already care." Ethan hadn't answered then. He couldn't. Ryan had turned his gaze to the ceiling, his voice barely audible. "She won't let anyone in after I'm gone. You'll need to remind her that she still can." That was the last real conversation they ever had. Now, months later, Ethan stood alone, that promise echoing louder than ever. The letter had arrived weeks after the funeral, containing only a few simple instructions. A place, a time, and a request that sounded impossible. A meeting, a chance encounter that wasn't meant to feel like one. He hadn't wanted to do it. Every part of him resisted. The thought of facing Emily again after so long, of seeing her eyes, knowing what they both lost, felt unbearable. But Ryan's words had been clear. "Don't see it as replacing me. See it as keeping your word." Ethan looked at the folded letter one more time before sliding it into his jacket pocket. The ache in his chest was a familiar one. Part longing, part guilt, part gratitude for a friendship that had changed everything about who he was. As the plane touched down back in their hometown, he caught sight of streets he hadn't driven in a decade. The old coffee shop on Maple Street. The library where he and Ryan used to study, arguing about architecture and philosophy in life. The park where they had once both watched Emily walk by for the first time. Sunlight in her hair, laughter that made the world quieter. He still remembered that day with painful clarity. Ryan had nudged him, grinning, "You're staring." Ethan had smiled, embarrassed. She's got that kind of laugh. And Ryan, ever fearless, had said, Then I'm going to make her laugh like that every day. He had kept his word. Ethan's chest tightened as he drove past the cemetery now. The rows of headstones like quiet punctuation marks on unfinished stories. He didn't stop. Not yet. He wasn't ready to stand there again. Instead, he kept driving until the cafe came into view. Cafe Bologna, the place where Ryan had written in his letter that Emily would be. The cafe hadn't changed much. Still the same worn bricks, the same flickering light above the door, the same little chalkboard out front offering coffee strong enough to remember. Ethan parked across the street and just sat there for a long time, watching, thinking. He could still walk away. No one would know. He could break the promise quietly, and life would go back to being the quiet, lonely shape it had become. But then he heard Ryan's voice again in his mind, calm, insistent. She deserves to live again. Ethan's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. He drew a deep breath, then another, and when he finally stepped out of the car, he didn't look back. He crossed the street, his steps slow but certain, the sound of his shoes against the wet pavement echoing like a heartbeat. He wasn't sure what he would say when he saw her, or whether she'd even remember him. But he knew this much. Some promises aren't made to be comfortable. They're made to keep love alive, in whatever form it takes. And as he reached the cafe door, the bell above it gave a soft, familiar chime, the kind of sound that makes you wonder if fate, after all this time, had been quietly waiting for you to show up. The cafe was quiet that afternoon, warm light spilling through tall windows, the soft murmur of coffee cups and conversation filling the air. Emily hesitated at the door, her heart unsteady. The letter, Ryan's letter, was still folded in her bag. "Please, take a chance," he had written. And though her hands trembled, she came. When she saw him, she froze. A familiar face, older but unmistakable. Ethan Walker. He stood to greet her, eyes filled with the same nervous kindness she remembered from years ago, from her wedding day, when he'd been one of Ryan's quiet college friends. "Emily," he said softly. Her name sounded strange on his lips, like something fragile being remembered. The first few minutes were awkward. Conversation came in hesitant bursts, about work, about Noah, about anything that didn't hurt to say out loud. But as the minutes passed, something gentle settled between them. Ethan spoke with warmth, with that steady calm that made the noise of the world fade a little. He made her laugh, not loudly, but enough to surprise her. When the check came, she realized an hour had passed. Maybe two. Outside, the evening light had softened. He offered to walk her to her car, and for the first time in years, Emily didn't feel entirely alone. As they reached the curb, he turned to her and said quietly, "It was really good to see you again." She smiled, small, uncertain. "You too." When she got home, Noah was already asleep. She stood by his door, watching him breathe, the stillness of the room wrapping around her. Then she looked down at the letter again, at Ryan's familiar handwriting, and whispered, "You knew, didn't you?" Her voice trembled, but there was something new in it. Not pain this time. Hope. And though she couldn't explain why, Emily felt that somewhere Ryan was smiling, because for the first time since losing him, she'd stepped back into the world. And the world, somehow, had met her halfway. Evening settled softly over Birchwood Lane. The house hummed with quiet life. Noah building towers on the floor, soup bubbling on the stove, and Emily trying to shake off a day that felt a little lighter than most. It had been 2 weeks since the cafe. 2 weeks since Ethan. Since she'd laughed without guilt. They had texted a few times. Simple, careful messages. But every time her phone lit up with his name, her heart did something she wasn't ready to name. That night, a sudden hiss of water broke the calm. Emily froze, then groaned as the pipe beneath the sink burst, soaking the floor. "Mom, the kitchen's flooding." Noah shouted, delighted. "Not helping," she said, half laughing as she grabbed towels. But as she knelt in the puddle, panic rose. She didn't know who to call. Then her eyes fell on her phone, on Ethan's number. She hesitated, then called. He arrived 20 minutes later, toolbox in hand, sleeves rolled up, a grin on his face. "You weren't kidding about the swimming pool," he said. "Laugh all you want," she replied, smiling despite herself. They worked side by side, towels, tools, laughter, until the leak finally gave in. When he sat back on his heels, wiping his hands, he said, "There, good as new. You didn't have to come," she murmured. "You called," he said simply. "That's enough." Before she could respond, Noah appeared, tugging Ethan's sleeve. "Can you help me build my tower again? It keeps falling." Ethan grinned. "Only if we make it stronger this time." Emily watched in the doorway as they built together, their laughter filling the house. It had been so long since these walls had heard that sound. Later, after Noah had gone to bed, Emily walked Ethan to the door. "Thank you," she said softly. He met her gaze, voice gentle. "Ryan would have fixed it too, you know. I just wanted to help." Something in his tone caught her, a quiet understanding she didn't expect. When he left, the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt alive. She looked at the little tower Noah had built with him, crooked but standing tall, and smiled. Because maybe, just maybe, something inside her was rebuilding too. The days that followed were gentle, almost deceptively so. Ethan began to appear in small ways. A call to check on a repaired pipe. A surprise cup of coffee left on her porch before an early shift. A weekend visit where he and Noah built an entire cardboard city on the living room floor. It was easy, too easy, and that scared her. Every time she laughed, a shadow crept in. Every moment she felt warmth. A whisper of guilt followed close behind. At night, when the house grew quiet, Emily would sit by the window, holding Ryan's old photo, the one taken on their honeymoon, sunlight in his hair, that smile she'd memorized. Her heart twisted, because she could still love him and yet feel something new stirring for another man. "Is that even possible?" she whispered into the dark. She tried to bury the thought, but it grew stronger every time Ethan showed up. When he carried a sleeping Noah from the car or fixed a flickering porch light without being asked. Ethan didn't try to take Ryan's place. He never could, but he was there, steady, kind, quietly present. And Emily, she felt herself leaning toward him, like a plant drawn back toward the sun after too long in shadow. But then came the guilt, sharp, merciless. How could she smile like this? How could she want this after everything Ryan had been to her? One night, as she tucked Noah into bed, he looked up sleepily and said, "Mom." Ethan laughs like Daddy used to. Her breath caught. It was such an innocent comment, yet it struck something deep inside her. She kissed Noah's forehead and left the room, her chest tight with 1,000 emotions that had no name. By the time she sat on the couch, tears had already found their way down her face. She pressed her palms against her eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry, Ryan. I'm so sorry." Because the truth was unbearable. She was beginning to fall for the man her husband had once called his best friend. And that, she thought, felt like the cruelest betrayal of all. It happened on a quiet afternoon, the kind that felt ordinary until it suddenly wasn't. Emily had stopped by Ethan's place to drop off a toy Noah left behind. He was in the backyard, talking on the phone. She was about to call out his name when she heard it. "I promise you, Ryan," Ethan said softly, his voice heavy. "I'm trying, but she doesn't trust it yet." Everything inside her went still. The toy slipped from her hand, landing soundlessly on the grass. Her mind scrambled for meaning, but the truth had already settled, cold and clear. The cafe, the timing, his patience, his knowing exactly what she needed before she could say it. It hadn't been coincidence. It had been planned. Ryan, Ethan, the letter. Her pulse thundered as she stepped forward. "You knew," she said, her voice trembling. Ethan froze. "Emily, you knew," she repeated, louder this time. "This was all arranged, wasn't it? You didn't just meet me at that cafe, you were sent." He took a step toward her. "Ryan asked me." She cut him off. "Was any of this real? Or was it just you keeping a promise to a dead man?" The words hung between them, raw, breaking. He tried to explain, voice cracking. "I cared for you long before he asked. I just didn't know how to tell you without losing what we had." But she couldn't hear him. The hurt was too loud. Her tears came fast, blurring his face. "You should have let me find my own way," she whispered. not turn my grief into a favor. She turned and walked away, not out of anger, but heartbreak too deep to name. That night, Noah's block tower stood half-finished in the living room. Ethan's tools still sat by the door. The silence felt heavier than ever before. Emily sat alone. The letter Ryan had written lying open on the table. His words, once a comfort, now felt like a wound reopened. She thought she had lost Ryan once. Now it felt like she had lost him all over again, and the man who had almost made her believe in love once more. Days passed in silence. The kind of silence that swallows everything, even the sound of your own thoughts. Emily moved through her days like a ghost. Work, home, sleep, repeat. Ethan was gone. Noah missed him, though he didn't say it. The house felt heavier, colder, as if every corner remembered him. One night, searching through an old box of Ryan's things, she found a photo album, the one filled with their early years. Her fingers traced a smile, the laughter frozen in time. And then a sealed envelope slipped free. Her breath caught. It was Ryan's handwriting. To my Emily, her hands trembled as she opened it. The paper smelled faintly of old books of him. If you're reading this, it means you've already found the first letter. And maybe him. I know you, Em. I know how you'd fight this. You'd feel guilty, angry, torn between love and loyalty. But please don't. Ethan is the best man I ever knew. I saw the way he looked at you, even when he tried to hide it. He loved you quietly, the way only someone who truly understands love can. I don't want him to replace me. I just want him to stay, for you and for Noah, because he's the only one I trust to help you live again. So please let him. Tears blurred the words, but Emily kept reading until the end, until she could barely breathe. Ryan hadn't betrayed her. He hadn't planned her future out of pity. He had done it out of love, the kind that lets go so the one left behind can find life again. Emily pressed a letter to her heart, sobbing, grief and love mixing until she couldn't tell them apart. Then she stood, almost on instinct, grabbing her coat. Outside, the sky opened, rain pouring down. But she didn't care. She ran, through puddles, through tears, through every memory, straight toward the cafe where it had all begun. Rain poured down in silver sheets as Emily pushed open the cafe door. Her heart pounded, part fear, part hope. Ethan was there, sitting by the window, a suitcase by his side. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from loving someone you're trying to let go of. When he saw her, he stood slowly, unsure she was really there. She took a shaky breath. I was angry, she said, voice breaking, because I thought you were chosen for me. Rain dripped from her hair, tears hidden among the drops. But I was wrong. She stepped closer. Ryan didn't just choose you for me. He chose you for us. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain tapping the glass, steady, forgiving. Ethan's eyes softened, pain melting into something gentler. Emily, I never wanted to lie. I just didn't know how to tell you without losing you. I know, she whispered. I read his letter. And that was enough. Ethan reached for her hand, hesitant at first, then sure. The touch felt like coming home. Tears mixed with rain as they stood there, hearts raw but open. It wasn't a perfect reunion. It was messy, human, real. Outside, thunder rolled far away, fading into silence. In that quiet, she felt Ryan's presence, not as a ghost, but as a blessing. Love hadn't ended with him. It had simply changed shape. And as Ethan pulled her close, the weight of grief lifted, replaced by something softer. Not the past, not the future, but the fragile miracle of now. They didn't need promises, just the courage to begin again. Morning light filters through soft curtains, golden, gentle, alive. The house feels different now, not heavy with silence, but filled with warmth, with laughter, with the small sounds of life returning. Emily stands in the kitchen, hair still messy from sleep, coffee in hand. Ethan flips pancakes while Noah hums beside him, face dusted with flour. It's simple, ordinary, and somehow everything. On the shelf, the wooden model they built together stands proudly, a little uneven but strong. Beside it, A framed photo of Ryan catches the sunlight, his smile frozen in quiet approval. Emily pauses, touches the frame, and whispers, "We're doing okay." Ethan looks up, catches her gaze, and smiles, the kind that says everything without words. She smiles back. Noah laughs, syrup spilling over the counter, and the house fills with life again. The ache hasn't disappeared, but it no longer hurts the same. It lingers softly, reminding her that love never truly leaves. It simply changes shape. Outside, the day waits, bright, forgiving. Emily steps out to the porch, breathes in the air, and for the first time in years, she feels peace. Love didn't end when Ryan left. It evolved, finding its way back through Ethan, through Noah, through every sunrise that followed. She looks up at the sky and whispers, "Thank you," because some stories don't end. They just begin again in smaller, quieter ways, and this morning is one of them. If this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe to Heartfelt Tales TV, where every story reminds us that even after loss, love always finds its way home.